Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven, and this is the Storytime channel. Quickly before we get into the stories, we have a new channel called Storytime where I'm covering some more spooky boards. So if that sounds like something you'd like, why not check it out after this video? Link is in the description. But today we have some malicious compliance stories, and our first story of the day is by That Berg Fan. Malicious compliance by the professor, not the students. Most of the university-related stories come from students. This one I experienced was orchestrated by the professor. The class was Conceptions of Human Existence. I was so lost. I like classes with facts, and had it not been a required class, I would have never have gone near this subject. First test I got a C-, and I learned nobody got a lower grade. This was an ominous sign that I was in trouble. I just could not absorb the vague, nebulous concepts being discussed. It was like getting a test question, does our worldview affect the world or is it the opposite? And being told my answer was wrong. How the heck should I know? So anyway, complete and total frustration. Around the halfway point of the semester, our professor, Mr. R, was about 10 minutes late to class and came in just at the point we were all getting up to leave. He asked us to sit and said it would be short. He said he had just left a meeting with a department chairperson and had been denied tenure. You could tell he was angry about it. Then class dismissed. The rest of our term, our classes were just chatting about topics in the news, no actual assignments to do, and I'm left wondering what I can do to pull up my grade. With a week to go before final exams, Mr. R lets us know that we have to do a final exam. Great. Should I have been taking notes during our class-wide chats? What the heck are we going to be tested on? He explains, since he did not get tenure, he is leaving the university after this semester. Our final exam will be a take-home essay, and we can choose one of 3 topics. First, our feelings about the war on terrorism. Second, our feelings on the American healthcare system. And finally, if we don't like either of those topics, we can make up our own question and answer it. If we turn in anything that shows effort, we will be given an A. He has to be able to defend his grades and just don't turn in a 2-sentence piece of crap and think that's worth an A. Put in some effort, get a guaranteed A. He was doing this for all classes he taught this semester. That was his malicious compliance for being turned down for tenure. We did in fact all get A's. I heard later from a student aide who worked in the office that the department head was mad about it, but didn't think he could do anything about it. If a teacher was being hard on you the entire year, but at the very end they flip it like this and you basically get a guaranteed A on your final and you absolutely will pass the class with flying colors because of it, would that one action be able to flip them from least favorite to favorite teacher for you personally? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Vaughn Ryan. You want to flaunt stupid rules at a then soon-to-be lawyer? 2 can play this game. I was in my final year of law school. As part of our curriculum, we had to accrue a certain number of hours of out-of-class course-related activities. It was a pretty high number of hours, but if you sort of planned to do them over the course of the years, it wasn't so bad. Anyway, there was a list of the activity types you could use to fulfill this requirement: attending conferences, publishing a paper, writing a report on a lecture, etc. But there were caps on the number of hours you could accrue in each category, so you couldn't just do one thing. The highest cap was for law-related internships, almost 50% of the total requirement. So I planned around that and got into an internship in my final year, which would get me above the required number of hours. You had to log your hours in an online system, which required you to fill the beginning and end dates for the activity and the number of hours you wished to log. As internships here don't usually have a fixed end date, only a maximum of 2 years, but the company or I could terminate it early, I thought I would just file the paperwork as soon as I finished the internship and it would be golden. However, as soon as I did that, the system rejected my request, stating that I should have filed everything before the end of my internship. I figured this was pretty dumb since anyone logging internship hours wouldn't know the end date or total hours before the end of their internship. So I went to the university's law department, which I thought would immediately correct this obvious mistake, right? Wrong. I basically got told tough luck by the professor in charge and that I should have applied with a fictitious end date and amount of hours before I finished the internship if I wasn't sure of when I was going to leave it. At this point, I'm super anxious, as this internship represents about 50% of the hours I needed to graduate. I wasn't going to be able to make up for that before my graduation date, and I had already passed the bar exam. In my country, you can take it in your final year of law school. And then it dawned on me. It was so simple, I thought it surely wouldn't work. If they wanted me to fill the online form with made-up data, then by all means, that's what I would do. I logged back into the system and filled out the same information for my internship, but I put the end date in the future. When the system approved the request, I submitted my paperwork with a note, as per instructions of Professor Z, I hereby request an amendment to the end date of my internship period according to the attached documents. Got full credit for the hours I needed, graduated on time, have been working as a lawyer for the past 10 years. Well, a good lawyer will find those loopholes and abuse them, so I'm just saying if you're ever in a bind, you might want to try and find Vaughn Ryan's contact information. This next story is by What? Why 2020, Forklift Mayhem. So I worked at a very large hardware store, both in the lumber yard and as a delivery driver. The lumber yard always closed at 5 p.m. and I was always off at 4:30. More often than not, I would stay 5 to 15 minutes late every shift to help customers in the yard, while my supervisor would finish other work. Now, my supervisor, let's call him Joe, would always get angry that I wouldn't work overtime because I had to go pick up my girlfriend after work. She and I only had one car at the time, so I really couldn't stick around longer than 10 or 15 minutes. Keep in mind, I wouldn't get paid for sticking around the extra 5 to 15 minutes every day. So I gave up a lot of free time for over 2 years. One day, Joe blew up on me more than usual for not agreeing to work overtime on my final day before my weekend. I told him I work 5 to 15 minutes extra almost daily to help him with customers in the yard. He said, "Big freaking deal. Oh, an extra 5 or 10 minutes, how generous." So after that, I clocked out and went home. The next shift, I was in the middle of bringing down a lift of lumber from a rack for a customer. The bottom rack had just been emptied by another customer, so I dropped the lift down and started to take off the lumber tarp when my 4:30 p.m. alarm went off on my phone. I was officially done with my shift. Since Joe said it wasn't a big help to stick around 5 or 10 minutes extra, I chose to leave. I left the lift of lumber, half wrapped with the forklift, blocking the lane for traffic to get through. The customer didn't say a word as I walked away. Joe drove up to me on the other forklift and said, "What the freak are you doing? I need you to finish up, we have a full yard." I looked at him, smiled, and said, "What difference does 5 or 10 extra minutes make? No big deal, right?" Then I walked away and clocked out for the day. Felt good, and it was worth the write-up the following day. I don't even see how they can really get away with giving you a write-up the following day for that. It's not insubordination to clock out on time for your scheduled shift. Refusing to give your employer 5 to 15 minutes of free overtime unpaid is not insubordination. If I was OP, I'd want to try and complain to somebody higher up if that's at all possible. Our next story is by the Toilet Slayer. Ok Band, we'll pay you what you want. This is my father-in-law's story, but he's too blind and uninterested in social media to post himself. This takes place in the 1970s. He was a drummer and played shows all over the country, USA, and even toured Canada for a good while. He set up a show for his band to play, and it was going to be $1 a person and all-you-can-drink beer. They also hired another band, headed by a guy named Dan. For the show, they rented out a hall and put out the word that there was going to be this awesome show. When making arrangements for the other band, namely pay rates, father-in-law offered that they would split the costs and split the total earnings between them. Dan declined, stating he wanted his band to get $50 and they wouldn't help with costs. Father-in-law offers again, Dan refuses. Fine, on with the show. The show gets wild. with people literally climbing through windows. They had so many people coming in and out, they stopped charging the door and just let people come and go. The malicious compliance. At the end of the night, father-in-law approaches Dan and with a big smile pulls out a huge wad of cash. He says big enough to strangle a cow, peels $50 off of it, and hands the $50 to Dan and says, "Here's your 50, thanks man," and walks away, splitting the rest of the money with his bandmates. The four of them got $80 each. In the comments, they clarified that $80 in 1970 is worth about $533 US today. So the other band definitely got the short end of the stick, but hey, that's exactly what they asked for. And they were the ones being stubborn about it, so sure, I'd certainly be crying all the way to the bank. This next story is by Mayoro Futopia. How my incredibly bright but equally lazy uncle spitefully turned in his homework. I was inspired by another post and remembered a story my grandfather told me about my uncle. My maternal side of the family is incredibly intelligent, which was a good and bad thing. Luckily, those genetics passed down to my brother and I, but that's a story for a different day. My uncle was a terrible student. Like many brilliant kids, he didn't feel the need to do any work and really didn't care about much, since he already understood what they were teaching or figured it out after hearing it once. As such, he never did his homework. This, of course, impacted his grades since homework made up a large portion of the points in his classes. He still didn't care and wouldn't do his work. Finally, in high school, his Spanish teacher told him that he would fail her class if he didn't do the homework, even when he passed the tests, simply because the class was very homework focused and would make up the majority of the grade. This wasn't a threat. She sincerely didn't want to see him fail. We think it was because she didn't want to have him another year, as he was a class clown, so she was basically pleading with him to do the work. Now, not only was my uncle intelligent and lazy, he was also hilariously spiteful. She wanted him to do his work? Fine, but he did it backwards. For example, if the word was pregunta, he would write ad nugerp on his paper. This made it nearly impossible to read, but he could say he was doing his work. Any other teacher would throw the paper away or demand he did it again, but the Spanish teacher decided that it was more important to get him out of her class. So she would use a mirror to check his work and see if he was really writing what he said, rather than a stream of random letters. Mind you, since it wasn't mirror writing, it wasn't perfectly legible in a mirror, but close enough she could understand. He turned in all of his assignments like that for the rest of the year, and even did his in-class final the exact same way. He ended up passing the class with a C-, enough that the teacher never had to deal with his headache again. Years later, when his youngest sister, my mother, who was 9 years younger, went to the same school, the teacher still remembered my uncle, and while my mom was not like her brother, the teacher was incredibly relieved my mother chose to take French instead. In the end, my uncle went on to become a lawyer and did fairly well for himself, living proof that C's get degrees. Man, I was just like OP's uncle in school. I never did any homework, and that's about where the comparison ends. The smart stuff and knowing everything automatically, that didn't happen, but we don't need to focus on that detail. And our final story of the day is by Dungeon 46. I made my homeroom teacher rage by writing 200 words in German. This was a few years ago, back in high school, around the start of a new semester. I got assigned to a new homeroom class in the morning with the German teacher, I'll call Mr. Stein, that I had taken the year before. Apparently, he had his own rules or whatever in his class that I wasn't aware of before showing up. The most notable being silence during morning announcements. I saw one of my friends when I walked in during the announcements the first day and decided to go chat. Mr. Stein didn't take kindly to me breaking his golden rule within seconds of transferring to his homeroom. He shouts, "No talking during the announcement," in a very, very thick accent. "You either owe me a detention or you write 200 words in your foreign language." I was dumbfounded by the immediate hostility and utterly confused. Luckily, my buddy stood up for me and explained that I didn't know his rule, so he should let it slide. I was let off with a warning. A few minutes later, the announcements cut off, so I resume my conversation with my friend. Then the intercom comes back on, asking for such and such to report to the front office. Obviously, this isn't the morning announcements, so I continue my conversation. That's it, 200 words in German on my desk, first thing tomorrow. I tried to protest, but there was no getting through. But I had a plan. The next day, I walked back into homeroom grinning ear to ear, just waiting for those words. Where's the 200 words in German I asked for? I say, oh, give me 5 seconds, Mr. Stein. I have it right here for you. I look at my friend and give him the biggest crap-eating grin I've ever produced, along with a wink that says, watch this crap. I walk over to the printer, pull out a sheet of paper, and scribble in the largest font I could fit on the page, 200 Wörter auf Deutsch, and slap it on Mr. Stein's desk. I watch the color drain from his face as he realizes what I just did. The entire homeroom is watching this like it's a Broadway musical. The silence is deafening as we all waited for it. No, 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 no! He starts slamming his fist down on his desk and starts furiously typing on his keyboard, obviously to the disciplinarian to give me a detention. I needed detention though. This felt like pure justice to me. For those that care, I ended up getting off scot-free because I was homies with the lady that handled the detentions. She said that I got him good, and she never really liked that guy anyway, but that I should apologize to him because I should still show some respect in his classroom. So I complied, mostly because I liked the disciplinarian lady. She wholeheartedly made sure I never got any repercussions for any of my high school antics. Well, it sure is nice when the detention lady has some complicit bias with you, able to just get you out of all the punishment. To be fair though, that was pretty darn funny. If I was one of the other students watching that go down, I would think that's pretty darn good. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like. And if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So, until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.